Hey team, hope we're doing well. Today's topic that we're going to chat about is training and injuries. Picking up injuries and niggles while we train is inevitable, and it does happen. So I just wanted to sort of talk about some mindset things, and then maybe some sort of helpful tips for you to sort of like look to rehab and train whilst we might have some niggles or injuries, basically. It is frustrating when we pick up a niggle or an injury. I've struggled with sort of some of those myself, and it's quite physically and mentally draining and quite difficult. But 99% of the time, when we do pick up one of those injuries or niggles, it doesn't mean that we have to completely stop doing what we're doing. If we reprioritize, focus on the things that we can do, we can keep some training momentum. We can sort of maintain or maybe build strength in different areas, and then at least maintain some level of aerobic fitness, or maybe keep that as a progressive thing that we're going to look at if we can't train strength, and then actively rehab what we need to. Injury tends to be the highest cause of re-injury, so that common misconception that we need to do nothing while we recover and then return to whatever activity we incurred the injury on is probably our downfall there. So that means we haven't retrained that tissue to like tolerate the thing that we've done. So if we pulled a hamstring while we were playing a sport and we just completely rest it, and we don't look at actually gradually reloading that hamstring, as soon as we go back to some sort of high velocity sprinting, it happens again, and then we're back to square one. While we're training, I think it's important to recognize that we can look at different ways to move. So something that I went through recently was when I was doing some back squats, I had some lower back sort of like quite intense discomfort. So I sort of stopped that, and I looked at different ways that I could do a squat pattern. I noticed that a dumbbell Bulgarian split squat I could do relatively pain-free. So there was a nice strategy for me to maintain some sort of like lower body squat strength, whilst I looked at rehabbing and then sort of addressing the cause of my back discomfort. Which we're going to delve into a little bit now. All right, let's do a deep dive into some sort of like training tips for when we picked up an injury. So more so like mindset here. I think it's important to sort of like reassess our priorities. So if we've sustained like a lower body injury, like I did with my back squat, can we take some time to prioritize some upper body strength and developing like our aerobic base, something like that. And just coming to terms with the injury, and just understanding that there are things that we can do to speed up your injury, and just allowing the process to happen rather than trying to jump back in a little bit too quickly. We also have our health pillars, so that's like our sleep, our nutrition, and maybe just sort of stress management. And we spoke about these a little bit sort of at the start of the videos that we did here. But making sure that we sort of focus on quality sleep, 6 to 8 hours, and a consistent sleep routine. Making sure that we are eating adequate, so calories that we can actually sort of promote recovery, and then of course looking at our protein here so we can maintain as much muscle mass as possible whilst we're doing that. With our training, we have quite a lot here, so I'm just going to try and touch on them quite briefly, but always maintaining our aerobic base is a massive priority. And then in terms of maybe like our strength here, I just wanted to talk about like different modes of training. So finding movement patterns that we can complete. As an example, for me, that was I can do a Bulgarian split squat relatively pain-free when I have my back injury, rather than a back squat. So that's a nice way that I can keep my squat going. That might be like doing a deadlift off blocks rather than doing a full range deadlift, because you feel sore right at the bottom range. So there's definitely ways that we can look at altering the movement so it's more pain-free. Sort of a second priority here would be sort of to gradually sort of reload. So building some stability of that like injured tissue and capacity in like a static sort of strength movement will be a priority before we start to increase like these dynamic movements. So things like, for me, a cable Pallof press and a kettlebell transfer were nice for me to just sort of gradually introduce some strength work to my lower back and core, but at sort of a lower intensity and quite a static, controllable manner. Another thing was like just rebuilding proprioception and sort of motor control, so allowing me to understand how to engage my core and then brace while I was squatting was quite a good thing. So that sort of static strengthening stuff is really valuable for me. gradually reintroducing range of motion. So for my squat injury, when I was trying to actually get back into my squat, I looked at just slowly increasing depth over time. I used this by sort of just going to a box to stop me going into that sort of deep range of motion where I felt pain. And over time, that range of motion got lower and lower till I was back at my full range pain-free. Another thing that I consider there was just the weight that I was lifting. It's not reasonable to think that we can go straight back into that sort of load that we might have incurred the injury on. So gradually introduce heavier loads, starting from a nice light way, and then sort of gradually reintroducing it. And I'm just going to give us some tips in a minute about sort of how much is too much and how much is enough. And then lastly, when we are sort of in the last steps of our rehab, I suppose, we can look at maybe some faster movements like plyometrics, change of direction, or sort of like a fast rate of force development movement, but make sure we've sort of established the static and then the sort of dynamic strength before we look at that high velocity stuff, because that's going to be sort of the trickiest for the tissue to adapt to. While we are actually doing our training, I want to have a little look at this traffic light system. So this is going to be a nice way for us to gauge if discomfort or pain is sort of tolerable, and will allow us to understand when we can progress those things, so like range of motion or load or anything like that. So this green amber area here is where we're probably going to spend the majority of our rehab journey. Some pain is okay and is very natural with our rehab journey, but we just want to try and discern how much is too much, and then at what rate can we start to actually like increase the amount of work we're doing. So if when we're moving we are in this green amber stage for like a week or two, that's quite a nice indication that we can look to introduce a little bit more work next week. But I'd probably look at like one of those variables at a time, be that weight, range of motion, volume, and then eventually kind of like speed. However, if while we're moving or in the sort of 24 to 48 hours after the training session, we feel that we're over a 5 out of 10 discomfort or the pain is intolerable, that's probably an indication that we might have done a little bit too much. So next time we train, we might do a little bit less. We might go not quite as deep, not as much, not as speedy, all of those sorts of things, so that we can be within that green and amber zone. That's quite a nice way over a long period of time. Using this traffic light system, we can bring our tissue back to where we need it to be. So when we go back to the sort of like sport or movement or training that we want to, we know that our tissues have really nicely been brought up to sort of manage and be able to complete the movement that we want to do. A little bit of a nerdy one, but I find this quite cool. Just a side note before we drop off is there's a phenomenon called cross education, where if we had like an injured leg, we broke our leg and we trained the absolutely fine one, it will actually assist us in maintaining strength and cross-sectional area of muscle on the injured limb. So that's a nerdy but cool sort of benefit, or something that highlights the benefit of continuing to strength train while we have an injury. Hopefully this has given us some food for thought when we are injured, or maybe we have a niggle right now, and this will give us a framework to sort of bring you back to a level where you can do exactly what you want to. Any questions around this, please don't hesitate, drop me a message and we can talk about it. Nice one, guys. Have a good one.